The goal is to bring you your next favorite band.
Thanks for having us. This is a very cool show.
Yeah, so through many iterations, and we finally landed on the weirdest one by far.
Yeah, simple feelings, and boom, you got a sound.
Yeah.
I remember this one time, I had been writing some songs, and I went out. I'm just going right in on this story. I went out, and so I was.
The story's longer than the song itself. We'll go ahead and play it.
And listen, it's going to be everybody's favorite band. Welcome to your next favorite band. That's both the show title and our promise to you. We here at Stereophilia Studio are tireless in our pursuit of finding incredible, genre-defiant artists who are either a hot up-and-coming band or a group that has been delivering for years but have flown under the radar. Tonight, a deep conversation, a new, spiritual indie pop from Mike Maines and the Branches. Each month, we will bring you live streams, audio podcasts, and perhaps even a live concert where you can listen to the stories and hear the music of artists personally curated by us based on what we feel will be worthy of your time. Be sure to subscribe and tune in to each episode because the possibilities are endless and you never know who will be your next favorite band. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I am your host, Phillip Reese.
Hello, everyone, and I'm your co-host, David Moore.
And you are listening to...
Your next favorite band.
Woo!
Bam.
Landed it.
It's pretty much perfect.
What a great episode. Conversation, music, everything. It is definitely going to be in your next favorite. I already got messages from some people just based off of the posts that we put out there that they checked out the music and they were like, I really dig this music. So like it's already happening. We hadn't even gone live with the show yet.
It's exciting when it happens, when you can build a little buzz around the guest that's on.
It is. It's pretty great. But before we get to Mike Maines, some housekeeping and some fun things to share. First and foremost, I wanted to kind of give a save the date here. We are roughly, maybe 6 weeks out from our Winter Wonder Jam. Third annual, sort of. Third time we're doing a holiday show. Second time as your next favorite band.
Correct. Second time under the name Winter Wonder Jam.
Correct. But 3 years in a row, we've done a show like this, where anybody who's been on the show in the calendar year, we invite them to come back and either perform a holiday song, a winter song, anything. Like they could play an original, it doesn't matter. But it's kind of like a retrospective back to who's been on over the prior year, share gratitude and tidings of great joy.
Yeah, and on top of it, we try and do some good.
And we do try to do some good. We raised some money for our local homeless shelter here in Bethlehem, which is New Bethany Ministries, but we also encourage you.
Yep, that's what I was just going to say. We encourage others to do the same because you may not be in our area, so you should definitely support the same type of charity in your area.
Yeah, absolutely. And we share a code to kind of text to give to New Bethany. So if that so moves you, great. But again, like we're saying here, if you're not from the area and you'd rather support your local, nonprofit organizations, then I think that's phenomenal.
And if you're super generous, you could do both.
You could do both.
I'm just saying the more the merrier. It's that type of thing.
And then the other thing that we are going to do this year, because why not plus it every year?
You wait 5 years from now, Madison Square Garden.
Well, we're not. I will be happy if we're just in Godfrey Daniels, for all that time. But we're also going to raise some money for Godfrey Daniels as well with a raffle of some pretty cool items. Not yet ready to announce, but there's definitely going to be some, I think, attractive items to be winning in the raffle.
Attractive. I like that descriptor.
You will want to be
very handsome.
Yes. But before we get to the interview, David, guess what? I saw live music.
Did you? I'm surprised by this revelation.
I did. It was the Bad Life Choice Monday. I got to see Bandits on the Run.
This was discussed. I knew that you were going to see this show.
Correct.
And you discussed it when we did the interview with the band. You actually informed them when we were discussing outside of the time. I know it's shocking to everyone to find out that we might talk to the band a little bit outside of the time that you see. And I'm happy that it came together. I'm jealous that I didn't get to go. Like, this is a show that definitely is on my list of like great concert experiences.
Oh yeah, I mean, Bandits are a tremendous watch. They are a special ticket to go get. And so even on a Monday, it was New York City. It was Mercury Lounge. It was my first time there.
No, I've never been.
That I can recall.
I haven't been. I may have heard of it. I've actually just never been.
Yeah, and their book actually. So Mike Maines was there Saturday when the right before Bandits were there Monday, and then I saw Mike Tuesday in Ardmore. But Mercury Lounge is booking some rather good your next favorite bandish type acts. But I have some video here. I have many favorite songs of the Bandits. But
wait, I'm going to guess which song it is. Can I guess?
Yeah,
it's Spellbound.
It is Spellbound. You nailed it. And we don't prep this stuff beforehand.
No, not at all.
David, basically, unless I need him to know it, I try to make it more organic, and I'm thrilled that he nailed it. So yeah, here is a Spellbound by Bandits on the Run.
Spellbound, you got me spellbound. Misdirection, smoking mirrors, illusion of games. Spellbound, you got me spellbound. I'm looking at you and I don't even know my own name. Last thing I knew, I was leaving my glass on mantle. Following a mysterious man with a candle. I said, I don't know what kind of sweet talking charmer you are. The fog's rolling in and I'm feeling treated.
The guy standing next to me is highly
Yeah, well, I appreciate his sort of like Mystery Science Theater 3000 whoops being added to the performance.
One thing that was evident of this performance was it was a lot of friends of the Bandits. People knew them through other avenues or paths. It wasn't just people who knew them for their music. It was definitely people who had either performed with them or were friends with them. So it was a very electric crowd because they were just so into it, as you could hear through.
Yeah, pals are great to have in the audience.
Yeah. And the other thing that was very cool, and I just didn't feel like I could play it here, was they've written a musical. And it actually is about the What's Eating Gilbert Grape story.
Oh.
And they played probably 8 songs from it and brought up people who are going to be performing. So it's apparently getting produced in New York next year.
Wow, so you almost got sort of like a jukebox performance of that.
Yep, yeah. And so the music is what you would expect from the Bandits. It's amazing. And just the musicality of it and these other people who were involved, it was just like kind of blew you away. So I didn't feel like I could play that here because it was very kind of like,
sure,
like, hey, this is a top secret like peek into what we've been working on, and it might come out next year. Obviously, these things are, a little bit not like 100% guaranteed. So it's kind of one of those things where
you're also involving many people at that point in time, so the complexity of getting those things on the when gets much more complicated than we recorded this and now we can release it.
Right. But it is stunning. It's wonderful. They all have theatrical backgrounds. Anybody who knows them or checked out our interview with them, they are actors and musicians.
If you have not, I would definitely recommend that. That was definitely one of the interviews that I even walked away from going like, wow, that was a good conversation.
It is good when you can have that feeling, but yeah. So Bandits show was amazing. If you can see them, I don't think they have anything more scheduled for the rest of this calendar year, but I do know that they're going to be touring again next year, and it's definitely something to check out. So let's move on to our guest for the night. We did pre-record this, so I mentioned. So I saw the Bandits in New York City on Monday, and then on Tuesday, the 17th, I saw Mike Maines play at Ardmore Music Hall. And he was kind enough to meet prior to the show to do an interview. So we, and Ardmore was fantastic by allowing us to have the different spaces to be able to do the interview. We interviewed Mike. And then we also interviewed next week. You'll hear our interview with Jesse Lundy. We also did that at Ardmore, and it's 2 different spaces. So thank you so much to Ardmore Music Hall for being so accommodating.
It is really generous of them. It's a great space too, and I'm not just saying that because they were so kind. It truly is a great space to see a show.
And they, if anybody, they are like the poster child for who got better during the pandemic. They were able to take that time to really upgrade sound and lighting and
almost everything. I mean, even
everything. General vibe.
The restrooms. Something that most people don't pay attention to, but really pays dividends.
Yeah, and it's another space, kind of like Mercury Lounge, that's booking a lot of the type of bands you'll see on this show. So if you're anywhere near Philadelphia, at Lehigh Valley, or what have you, Ardmore Music Hall is a wonderful venue to check out. And Jesse does part of Rising Sun Entertainment. Rising Sun Presents. He does a lot of the booking there, as well as some other places. It's a very fun interview. But for this week, we will focus on Mike Maines. Mike, this interview, obviously, he was interview number 1 for us, and we talk about that a little bit. And so this is his 4th album that came out, and so we talk a lot about how that continues his musical journey, if you will, from the first 3. And then there's a very vulnerable portion of the interview where he shares that he had to take a break from writing music, from performing, to focus on his mental health, and just applaud his courage to share much of what he's shared. So I think everybody's going to get a lot out of this, and really get a peek into that type of struggle. And so there's a lot of people who have that going on in their lives, either personally or someone they're trying to help through it, or just all of the above. So I really was honored that Mike shared this with us. And I checked with him afterwards. I was like, hey, you okay with everything we talked about? And he said, absolutely. This is kind of like it's helping him through it. And then he hears so often how it's helping someone else kind of not feel alone. And so I just really look forward to sharing this with everyone, because I thought it was a very deeply emotional and again, like a vulnerable is probably the best word for it, for what he shared. But there's also a ton of really cool just music talk and all that kind of stuff as well. And then his music on top of all of that is just some of the best out there. So to me, it's a wonderful experience and a good ride to take right now. So David, why don't you share the bio? And then he personally he wanted us to highlight Losing My Head, which is off this new album that he has out called Memory Unfixed. So recorded that song. We're going to let it play the whole way through because it really kind of elevates at the end. So I didn't really want to, sometimes we cut it short or we kind of start talking over it. I want this song to play through, and then we'll get into the interview with Mike. So David, take it away.
As vocalist, songwriter, producer, and namesake of Mike Maines and the Branches, Mike Maines thinks aloud in his songs. He ponders events and experiences as well as their ensuing effects on his identity, telling intimate stories through artful pop rock. After generating millions of streams and consistently captivating audiences on tour, the band recognize, accept, and absorb these formative mementos on their 2023 fourth full-length offering, Memory Unfixed. I'm just a husband, a wounded healer, and a grateful storyteller, Mike leaves off. If these songs make you feel less alone, I did my job.
So here is Losing My Head by Mike Maines and the Branches, followed by the interview. Enjoy.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So right there you heard some Mike Maines and the Branches with Losing My Head off the new record, Memory Unfixed.
Okay, yeah.
And welcome to the show, Mike Maines.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, thank you. And do you know you are interviewee number 1 for our show?
Oh, come on.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
awesome.
yeah. We had about 7-8 months where I was a co-host on a different podcast where I was the curator of the music content, and then had it kind of split off on its own. And we were already in kind of conversation at the time. And so, yeah, June of last year was our very first episode as Your Next Favorite Band. And it was Mike Maines and the Branches was episode number 1 for us.
It's an honor. Thank you.
And then now we're basically at like episode 80 here. So,
Come on.
yeah.
It's been a busy year.
Yes. Very busy. Like since then, lots have changed. Obviously for us, but also for you, a whole new album.
Yeah.
And it's great. I love the sound. I mean, like I always, to me, like the Mike Maines and the Branches sound is one that I often go to for my own listening. I often recommend. So like a lot of people will say, "Oh, you're this. You know, what's my next favorite band?" People will say. And a lot of times if I don't have enough time to ask them their like favorite genres or whatever, you're a very easy go-to one for me because I think your music is very universally will be liked by almost everyone's ears.
Thank you. It's a huge compliment. Because sometimes I fear, we almost have bounced around too much.
Sure.
In my estimation of the sound and the development, and yet at the same time, the compliment we get is you go to a lot of different places sonically, yet it all feels like it belongs together.
Definitely.
And it has this universal appeal.
Sure.
So I'm like, I never set out to do that. I'm glad that it's happening.
Yeah, and I think too, like I remember when we chatted last time that I think for you that there is this very you had I guess a different approach to each album you've released.
Yeah.
And you felt like some of your listeners didn't come along for that ride, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I wondered, like, since I came at your music a little bit later on in the catalog, that in retrospect it didn't feel that way. But I guess I could certainly see where if somebody came from looking for a certain element,
Yeah.
that they felt maybe, oh, it's not there anymore. But to me, sonically, it's got, just this excellence to it throughout.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. A lot of times we do go through like the backstory, the history of the band. Since we have done that with the prior episode, feel free to go back and check out episode 1. But I thought maybe we could do like a quicker kind of run through for people. Grew up in Michigan?
Yeah,
and
primarily.
then
Born in Denver, that was about it, and then spent most of my youth in Michigan.
Yeah. And then where the music really happens, though, is Texas. You end up moving to Texas. You meet your wife in Texas, right?
So met Shannon kind of through local bands in the Michigan scene.
Uh-huh.
And then I always tell people I had like a midlife crisis at 21. So
Right.
I moved to Texas, and her and I stayed in touch, sent demos back and forth.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Found the band, and then I kind of relocated the drummer, bass player that I had met in Texas. We moved up to Michigan and never looked back.
Got it. Yeah. And there was a fun element that I think we should share too. Is you worked for a casino.
Yeah.
In that time frame, and I love the idea of a songwriter being faced with all of this, whatever the words you would want to use for it, opulence, and then also kind of people who are just losing all of their money.
Yeah.
Or someone who happens to hit whatever, just all of that excess, I guess.
Yeah.
And just being somewhat feeling you're like, well, I don't really want to be here. I want to be writing music and writing, but I just got to think that's a funny kind of juxtaposition.
It's wild. I had this front row seat to people, just walking past 4 rows of slot machines. I might be walking past a woman who is spending her and her husband's life savings that he is unaware of.
Mm-hmm.
I might walk past a blackjack table where some guy just won you know, $100,000, and I might be then oftentimes pulling up to a slot machine where some woman is sucking down Virginia Slims and just won like $30,000.
Sure.
But who knows how many $100 bills she had pumped into both of those machines beforehand.
And her hand is like black with quarters and other coins and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, when I read about that, I was just like, wow, like you find yourself taking a job and it's like a casino thing because it pays the bills, but you're like, you know, writing music about such, you know, aspirational, like great stuff, and then, you know, you're just surrounded by all of that. It's just, I thought that was an interesting thing. But so yeah, then you moved back to Michigan and you never looked back. But then somewhere along the way, you also moved to Nashville, which is where you are.
Yeah. Which we've been. So this will be this fall. It'll be actually this month. Goodness, it happened quick. It's 4 years. 4 years this month. We moved down. We bought a place in Nashville. I had spent, I would say, on and off now for about maybe the last 8 years, doing a lot of writing for TV and film.
Sure.
It's called sync licensing, and I've had songs placed in films and TV shows, and that kind of took off for me, and then enabled that, kind of became my day job, if you will.
For sure.
And it enabled us to move down to Nashville, and then parlayed into a lot of songwriting for other artists and producing as well.
Oh, cool.
It's been good. I really love Nashville.
Sure.
There's pros and cons, I think, to anywhere that you live. The tight knit community in Nashville is incredible, though.
That's awesome.
In that, I've also been guilty of being, you know, the guy who is comparing my behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reels, and it just wears you out. And so something that an old friend, a bit of advice that he had given me is, you have to think about it like when you move to a music city and everyone, your friends and colleagues and just folks that you know around town, you have to learn to celebrate the victories that other people have and treat it less like competition and more like, oh, so-and-so on the track team, they just won a championship.
Sure.
Good for them. And hopefully our baseball team will win a championship this year. You know?
Exactly.
Someone else's success doesn't threaten mine.
No.
If anything, it can
help.
Remind me. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, if it's possible for them, it's possible for me.
Correct,
you know?
yeah. Oh, yeah, it certainly could be inspirational, but it also might shine a light on that sound or that style that matches yours, and now people are going to go in search of a similar, you know, and, you know, slightly different but the same kind of thing. I've seen nothing but that, really, and I think the other thing too, and this is like, you know, becoming friends with other podcasters, same kind of thing. Like, you could sit there and try and think we're in competition with each other, but we're not. It's like, I would have somebody on the show that I would say to one of them, you should have this person on. They'd be great for your show too.
Yeah.
And because audience members, consumers of content, just have different flavors that they're interested in. So not all things for all people. So, you know, we just, you know, it's fun to be in such a supportive community.
Yeah, truly. And I have more peace there with that sort of a mindset and posture than I did prior, when I was feeling more insecure. And to be honest, I'm not sure that insecurity ever, at least for me, it's been my experience, it hasn't fully gone away. It's still there. I find it being triggered every once in a while, and yet I'm also reminded there, while I'm not maybe where I would love to be, I'm way further along than where I was when I started, and I know that there are people that would give anything to have accomplished what I have. So it's almost like, and even the tours we've been on in the past with bands that are bigger than us, or they're filling up rooms with thousands of people and apologizing that there aren't more people at the show. And I'm like, man, I would love to have that problem.
Right.
So it just, I don't think that ever really goes away. It's almost like the fear of being on the highway without a safety belt. Sure. I think being afraid in a certain instance shows me that I care. But if I only focus on that, it will really begin to sort of poison my peace.
Right.
I think my creative process as well.
Yeah. Well, I think, and this comes up a lot for, like, you're an artist in that truest sense of, like, whether you're painting pictures or writing a song, you're still a creative. Yeah. And when you put it out there, it hurts. Like, it's one of those things. It's a painful experience. Yeah. So then also, you obviously want it to be liked. And so then if it is or it isn't, that's got to be a challenge. And different than a painter who might do one a year. Like, you're putting out 12 songs at a clip, you know?
Yeah.
So you're like, please like it. I worked really hard. It's meaningful to me, and I hope it's meaningful to you. And then it's sit and wait and see if it hits. And I got to think that's stressful, and the anxiety or the insecurities can certainly come along with that.
Yeah, it definitely. I'm learning to dance with that devil better now than I ever have, because I'm coming back to source. You know, for me, why did I start writing songs to begin with? It was to process what I was going through, was to feel less alone.
Yeah.
And that's, if it remains that, it doesn't insulate me from all of those other, you know, emotions of putting an album out, and then you look and all your streaming numbers are starting to move up, and you're looking at these analytics and feeling like, oh, you know, things are really taking off, and then you put the album out and maybe it grows a little bit, and then maybe it kind of drifts downward. You never really know. And I'm learning that if I place my identity in those external things, there isn't a lot sustainable joy to be found there.
No, it's like, you know, there's no number that it will equal happiness.
You're absolutely right.
You're only going to be disappointed or okay.
Yeah. Because then it's a dangerous place to be. This is I remember hearing this on, I think it was a Rob Bell podcast, where he was talking about like this rabbi gave an advice to his disciple, where he gave him 2 index cards, and on one it said student, and then the other said I am from the dust. So it's this idea of, you know, if you get super discouraged and feel like you're failing, or, you know, it's never enough, or I'll never arrive no matter what I do. I'm a student. I'm learning. Be patient. And then if you start to gain some success and feel a little too big for your britches, it's like, well, I am from the dust. Like, this is temporal. Sure. You know, I'm not going to be here forever. Let's really make sure that our definition of success is rooted in something that is timeless. You know, and that kind of helps me.
Sure.
So let's not be too to the one side or the other.
Yes. No, that's a good way to look at it all. If you're hearing the music in the background, there's a sound check going on for tonight's performance. And I think, too, we were going to touch on this a little bit. There's an element to that, too, of other people will get stuff out of your music and not feel alone. So, like, you're talking about writing music because you were needing to work through some stuff.
Yeah.
And then that connects with an audience member in such a way that now they'll have a value from that. And that's some of the coolest stuff that I've seen happen, you know, as working through talking with different musicians, is when a song or a whole out, whatever, like a story can really just resonate with somebody to a point, and they just, in a point where they really needed it in their life.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Even last night, there was a gal at the show last night who said, "Thank you for talking about your mental health journey, your recovery journey. It's encouraging to me." And those are the little mile markers along the way that kind of help me remember, okay, you know, you're still on the right track.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So if we want, let's go back to just the albums. Like, so, because there's probably some threads there to the story, and then we can come back to this point, because there was a break you took between the previously last album and the current one to work on your mental health. That, again, I think people hearing about that and how important that is, and the ability to take a moment to say that's a huge thing to make sure you have under control.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But the first album, so like you write that one, does it have, of all of them? So I think your music has this very nice balance struck between the music that you're writing, and lyrically a balance in your spirituality, like you talked about, mind, emotion, spirit, all that kind of stuff. There is an element of spirit there.
Definitely.
More so in the earlier stuff, as far as what I can tell, but maybe...
Yeah, when we first started in particular, I mean, I was kind of fresh out of this deeply evangelical, non-denominational, almost like New Testament, crazy revival church experience. And so a lot of what I was writing was framed through that. And like I've heard it said before, there's still a fire down in there. I think in a wild sense, it felt like as I progressed, it felt like only singing about what I believed instead of singing about the way that my belief sort of enables me to process the rent I think that we all pay for being human, which is pain.
Yeah. I heard you mention that at a previous interview, and I thought that's such a very interesting phrase.
Yeah.
And I think, too, a lot of times an artist creates out of that pain.
Totally.
And so that really kind of ties a lot of this stuff together.
Yeah. And I stole that from Richard Rohr. He was a Franciscan priest. And he says, pain is the rent we pay for being human. But I don't know. I also too, like I fell in love with U2. I feel like 20 years after everyone else did.
Bono went through similar, like where he had a phase where he was, really very outspoken about, what that meant to him.
Totally.
Yeah.
And in a way, I think for me, having played a lot in that world, there became this real sort of like distaste and distrust, and also like commodifying or homogenizing like my personal faith for personal gain. Frightened me.
Sure.
I just didn't. It felt icky and weird, and I think there are bands that do it who do it very, very well, and I've also been on the road with guys that are sort of known for their faith-driven music, and they no longer believe in the faith that they're selling. And initially I would think, you hypocrite, you coward, and now I think, I don't know that I fault them as much as I fault the industry and the structure.
Yeah.
So I think for me, I started recognizing where things could go at a very, very early point in our career. And I mean, we had opportunities to go out with some of the biggest names in that sort of sector, and to be signed to some of the major labels connected with that industry, and that portion of the industry, and we just said, man, I feel like that is climbing to the top of a ladder that's besides the one we really want to be on. So the fire is still doing well. I really wanted to sing and write in a way that was more accessible than just people who might share my world. That's where things started to shift on our second album, and we also noticed a lot of the pushback of, oh, I liked your first album better, which you're always going to have that.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I was meaning too when I was saying, like, I could tell there probably was a style of person who wished you didn't lose some of that element to the music, but it's still there. Like you said, the fire is still there. It just may not be there in the specific lyric of choosing these words.
Yeah.
But the same, support and motivation, and again, that's in you. So it's going to naturally be there in your music too.
Yeah. And to me, there's something that feels more sincere about metaphor and about pointing in the direction of something than being on the nose about it.
Yeah, so in service to it instead of representing it.
And surprisingly, in particular with our last two albums, being more honest and vulnerable about my personal experience, and in particular on Memory Unfixed, also my anger and critique about events that I'm seeing happen in culture, and not necessarily wanting to write in a way that's critiquing culture, more so in a way of saying I'm angry about this. I'm also seeing people respond to that, and so it's I mean, again, I don't know that there's any guarantee one way or the other.
Sure.
I'm just finding, for me, Calm Down, Everything Is Fine is a record I made where we had this success off the first album. I knew I didn't want to continue going down this, like, primarily, like, faith-based genre of music that just felt weird. So I wanted to write an album that was a step in the direction I wanted to head in, while also being terrified of losing everything that I had built. So that was the most...
I could see that being a big fear. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that was the record I made where I was truly, I think, more worried about how it was going to be received than I was about making sure it was the best piece of art that it could be.
Sure.
And every record that I've made since then, the number one objective is, let's just make the greatest piece of art possible.
Sure.
And I'm going to have hopes and aspirations for it, and really... no matter what happens with the album, I'll be able to hang my hat knowing this is the best damn reflection of who I am at the time, you know?
Yeah. So the title of Calm Down, Everything Is Fine, is that about a specific element, or are you talking to yourself? Like, is there...
I think I'm talking to myself. And there's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek, there's a bit of a wink in there.
Sure.
You know, calm down, everything's fine. It's like, calm down, which is what I should have been doing. Everything is fine. Everything wasn't fine.
Right.
You know, but that too, that kind of gave the me sight of a trailhead that I could jump onto and follow it to kind of navigate my way out of that experience, which was... Yeah, it was very difficult. We went from being a band who started out, and then before you know it, in a year and a half, we're touring all over the world.
Right.
And then we buy out of this record deal because we felt like, again, it was just taking us in the wrong direction. And then we get married, we come back from tour, and I'm working at a car wash in northern Michigan to support my wife and I, in between making records, going, what the heck am I doing?
Right.
So that the title was also sort of a mantra.
Sure.
Or on one hand, there was truth to it, but it was also, it kind of felt like baked into it was this punchline that I think kind of kept me centered.
Right. Which makes, I mean, there's that meme where the dog is in the room on fire and he just, underneath it says everything is fine. It's kind of like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, and then the other thing I think that your music has, like we talked about it having this great balance, I also think there's stuff that's out of balance on purpose.
Yeah.
Where you have, one element I'm speaking to here is, you have these songs that sound incredibly happy, but the lyrics are really explaining something that's not so happy.
Yeah.
Or vice versa. Like I think that's fun, and I think the element to that is you need to spend time with a Mike Maines record, because you don't pick that up the first listen or the second. Like, it's after you listen, you're like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
This song I'm like happily bebopping around to is actually about how hard it is to be in a relationship, or what you're angry about, what in society or whatever. And so it's like, that's really cool stuff. I really enjoyed that.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you picked up on it. That's I wasn't doing it intentionally. I wasn't doing it in a way where I realized it until someone pointed out to me. There's this Tom Waits quote: "I love beautiful melodies telling me terrible things."
Yeah.
And that, I thought, man, yeah, that does it. There's something, I like the contradiction of this upbeat sort of dancey track singing about one of the worst times in my marriage. And it's also funny, like, I think about one example of that being our song Breathing Underwater.
In the morning over coffee, threw my heart on the table, told you what I've done in the dark. You felt far away. I was gonna be a shelter, held you while you fell asleep. We were in the back of my car, before you were far away. Now that you see darkness in me, won't you please, please?
We'll play shows and people are just dancing around. And like, oh man, I love that. I'm like, I'm glad, because that will be a warm invitation into the world that song exists in. While also, if they're able to go back, as you said, there's more there if people want to dig into it, and if not, then on the surface, there's still just an enjoyable groove to lean into. Yeah.
That's exactly right. There's definitely great vibe to all of these songs. And another one to talk about is Everything's Gonna Be All Right. We're kind of going back an album again.
Everything's gonna be alright, gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright. Hush now, baby, don't you cry. I'ma sing you to sleep tonight. I know it's strange and hard to grasp the fact that we can understand the meaning of this life. Sometimes it's hard to find, but if we learn to look between the lines, I think that if we'll open our eyes, we're gonna see the sunrise. Everything's gonna be alright, gonna be alright. Everything's gonna be alright.
Yeah, and that one was written the week before Shannon and I got married. I was in this season, I would say manic or borderline neurotic, where I was reading Stephen King's On Writing memoir about writing every day. And then he even later in later interviews said, even I don't write every day. I have seasons where I step away. And for me, that Everything's Gonna Be Alright was in the season where I was being, I would say, to an unhealthy degree, neurotic. Like, I gotta write every day for fear of missing out. And
Sure.
I remember we were at Shannon's parents' house, and it was time to go outside and do some work to the yard so we could be prepared for the wedding. And I said, okay, I'll be out, just give me 20 minutes. And I sat down and wrote kind of the beginning of one song that then gave birth to Everything's Gonna Be Alright. And then that's kind of where that song was born. So on one hand, there's some fear motivating it. On the other hand, it's like, well, the more I show up to the river and put the fishing pole in the water, the better chance I have at catching a fish.
And your desire to not do yard work.
Exactly. Without a doubt.
Yeah, very cool. And that even probably speaks to a good. So after in a more recent phase, you did have to take a break to kind of like focus on some mental health. Specifics and whatnot are kind of irrelevant when people are faced with that. It's a very real and important thing to focus on and get set right. So whatever you would want to share for that is again, like, I think huge for people out there who may need it, like that person who comes up to you after a show.
Yeah. So for me, I'm in recovery from a plethora of things, right? It's for me, recovery in particular, I'm realizing that as an addict, as someone who is, this December, someone who is going to be 2 years sober.
Mm-hmm.
I'd come to this point where I had just felt so haunted by my disease, my addiction, as well as recognizing that part of the mental health and the depression and the anxiety is coupled with the shame that I had.
Yep.
Rooted not only in being an addict, but also being not an orphan, but I've been on my own since I was about 15,
mm-hmm.
and I've had my aunt and uncle were amazing when I was growing up. They gave me an incredible foundation, and yet still, I didn't, and even to this day, I really have to be mindful of the fact that I don't feel that I belong.
Mm.
Even Christmas for the last 15 years has been spent with a family where I am kind of considered their surrogate son.
Sure.
And Shannon, my wife, is considered their surrogate daughter. And I am unbelievably grateful for that.
Sure.
And I'm still reminded of the fact that, but I'm not their son. Yeah. And I don't have really a relationship with anyone in my immediate family, with the exception of I've been able to slowly build or rebuild a relationship with my dad. My mother, last I knew, was homeless, living in and out of drug-infested hotels and stuff like that in Denver. So, 2020... the pandemic leading into 2021,
mm-hmm.
wrote and recorded Memory Unfixed in that time.
Mm-hmm.
It was also the first time in my life where I had lived in the same house for the longest amount of time I'd lived anywhere in my life.
Wow.
Up until that point, I'd never lived anywhere for more than maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years at most. And so I'd been in this home over that threshold, and it felt like the first time in my life where so much of the stuff that I couldn't process, because I had finally sat still long enough, was able to kind of float down to the bottom,
mm-hmm.
and I could look into the bucket and go, oh, there's a lot down there that I need to work on. And that was really, really painful. I
imagine that's a shocking moment of holy crap, like
yeah, and
then you want to push that bucket away,
or get drunk or watch porn or
mm-hmm.
get stoned out of my mind, right. Or be a workaholic or eat too much or blow up a bunch of relationships with people that I love and care about, because combined with these various addictions that I carry a lot of shame about, there's also this little boy,
mm-hmm.
in the therapeutic sense, who is feeling abandoned by his family at a very young age, who is
right.
also afraid of being abandoned or hurt. And God, it was all of that kind of happening at the same time, and I'm learning to, as I was growing up, in particular, the porn addiction is something that developed at a very, very, very young age, having been molested by a family member. That combined with the alcohol and abusing marijuana, all these different things, these are ways that I learned how to sort of process and survive and numb the pain,
the reality.
Yeah. And it did that. It
mm-hmm.
worked while also setting my life on fire.
Yeah, being destructive.
Yeah, it's like you're stuck in this hole. So the way that you get out of it is you light a stick of dynamite and it blows you out of that hole while also blowing up that hole and then creating a bigger,
deeper, better hole.
Yeah. And so at the end of 2021, blew up several relationships with
mm-hmm.
some friends, had a suicide attempt, and really took a big step away. It was the first time where I had been in recovery rooms leading up to that for about 3 or 4 months, still just could not get sober. And that was the moment where I think seeing what I was doing to my wife and close friends who, these are kind of like ride or die people in my life, also saying like, you are in a plane that is headed straight for the ground. This is the last possible chance that we have of putting on a parachute and getting the hell out of here. Yeah. I hope that you turn this around, but I have to go.
Sure.
And my wife was right there as well. And so that for me, I thought, especially after the attempt, like, I'm still here. I need to go get help. And that was really is incredibly expensive. And it was the best decision I ever made.
Yeah.
Spending, I was in the desert for almost 2 months, and then I went to Denver, spent some time in the mountains. I was away from home for almost 6 months.
Sure.
And it changed my life.
Yeah.
And I feel like 2 years later, I'm finally starting to like myself, which feels so weird to say.
I don't mean to laugh, but I just think it's seeing your show and watching you perform with this, and we've said cinematic, like dynamic thing, and you would never think that that's somebody struggling. Like having watched you perform before all of that hit.
Yeah.
The pinnacle. It's just like that person's got their life together, and they're just, don't doubt themselves, and how could you possibly, if you pull this music out of the ether and perform it with such bravado, like you must be just floating on air. And to know that that's definitely not the case. It's just like, it's a reminder for everybody that it's like, that it's not something where you should just always assume that, like, be there for people. To let them have that moment to share or whatever. That's something that we try to do. So thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, it's such amazing vulnerability, but to normalize this stuff and to make it where it doesn't have a stigma or have to have shame associated with it. Everyone is working through stuff like this, or helping someone work through stuff like this. And you came forward on social media sharing a lot of this a little ways back. I think it was about a year ago, and I was just kind of blown away by that step. But it inspires other people to do the same, and it just again makes other people not feel so alone. In fact, you shared that one of the main things that helped you work through was group therapy that showed you weren't alone, which then was, and I'm not picking these words, you shared them, were transformative for you.
Yeah. Group therapy, I mean, there's an incredible amount of research, peer-reviewed journal research, showing that group therapy is wildly more effective than one-on-one cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
Because you are in an environment where you're recognizing, oh, okay, I have scars that match all of these other people, and none of us wish we had them, knowing that the other folks do, and hey, we're still here. Also, we've lost some folks along the way too.
Right.
This is a hill we're willing to die on. Let's get through this together.
Right.
And being in recovery as well, you hear people talking about 12 steps, and it's all true, right? Like, it's as all of the cliches are true. Also, going to rehab. Going to rehab is very surreal. You're kind of like, shit. I'm the guy that went to it. I'm the dude that had to go to rehab. I'm that guy. And I do have a hospital band on my wrist, and like, people are watching me to make sure, it's all. The stereotypes are true. You do go to rooms, most of which are under fluorescent light in some like rundown church basement. And I found God there in those rooms.
Sure.
To me, being in rooms with people who are talking about, it's hard not to get emotional, You're sitting in a room with people talking about the things they are most ashamed of. And instead of receiving judgment and condemnation and being told, you're a scumbag and this is why you don't belong, they are receiving love. I've been there. Come on, welcome to the island of misfit toys. Come up to the table. You know, you can break bread with us here.
Yeah.
The thing that you're most ashamed of is your access card to this tribe.
Sure.
And it gave me friendships that I now have that will last the rest of my life.
Right, of
you
course.
know, and it gave me a lot of the family I felt I didn't have. You know, so I think that's the beauty to me of grace, spirit. I remember reading this book. Spirituality is, or religion is for people who are afraid of hell. Spirituality is for those who've already been there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I make a joke often. If you want to know who your friends are, go to rehab. And it's and I'm grateful for that though, because the folks initially there was bitterness and resentment, like F you guys for not wanting to stick this out. Now it's not that. It's more, what a gift living authentically and in the absolute wide open about who I am, and recognizing that is going to push some people away, but it's also going to be an open invitation for the right people to be in my life, and that's a gift.
Yeah,
truly.
Yeah. Was there any music being written in your head during that time?
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole new album.
That's what I would figure, but also I didn't know if maybe it got turned off, like out of the self-preservation of this is more important, but I figure the creative never stops.
When I was in rehab in Arizona, I'd written one song, and the CEO of the facility, or I can't remember what you would call him, like the clinical director, had found out that I was playing and knew that I did music for a living, and was like, you can't do that. And then the nurse, who was kind of the head nurse, who was responsible for watching all of us, she was like, no, I don't care what he says, you play your guitar, or you go play that piano whenever you want to, because this is medicine for you. And I wrote a song. I really only wrote one, maybe two songs when I was in Arizona, and then when I went to Denver for to kind of continue developing, I wrote an entire album there, and that was incredibly therapeutic. Now, how much of that will see the light of day, I don't know. I think there are a few songs that will. And that, just that process of you know, going to meetings, still working on my therapy, and kind of showing up with that sort of almost like going and writing a song is like showing up to the factory line day in and day out. That sort of mechanic way of approaching things really solidified me and nourished me.
Super interesting that you went back to Denver too. Like, did you choose that because it's where you started, or was it just the universe?
It was universe, and I remember talking to the CEO of that addiction center and just having a very immediate connection with him, and then he said, you know, when you come, you also have to get a job while you're out here. And I said, well, I'm self-employed. I don't really want to go get a job, but could my job be writing my next album and doing a bunch of demos and recording, and I can share that and show that to some people or whatever. And he's like, absolutely. I'm like, cool, I'm in. And then the bonus on top of that was very much, this is where I literally came into being.
Exactly. That's what I mean. Like, it's very interesting, like full circle. To reborn, like to be rebirthed out of all of that.
That's cool. I never thought about it that way. That's very well said. To go be reborn. Absolutely. Yeah,
it's pretty cool. Well, I hope some of that music sees the light of day. That's got to be very, very just even looking back at it, it's probably you were very in the moment, I would think, because of working on so many things that were just like you were right there, that it's probably got a different style to it than everything else you've written.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah. And there is one song in particular that we've actually tested out a little bit live this year, and that's been fun to go, okay. Whenever we're doing these weird kind of random one-off shows, we'll always slip in something new just to kind of see what kind of reaction it gets, and it's been exciting to test out.
Very cool. Well, so the music that just came out, you wrote before all that happened.
Yeah.
And one of the things I heard that was very interesting was the I guess you were looking for what was going to bring it all together, and you saw the cover art painting with the name Memory Unfixed.
Yeah.
And I just think that was a really cool thing to share, because it's a cool story.
Anna Nunez, who's just an absolute sweetheart, her and her husband Jesus, who are good friends from Florida, she designed the album artwork for When We're in Love as well. And we had gone through so many different ideas. You know, it was going to be Lost Boys. I thought about calling it Losing My Head. I thought about calling it Nervous Wreck.
Which are tracks on the album.
Yeah. And just could not settle on it. And then I said, forget it, I give up. It'll just be self-titled. And that still didn't feel right. And then just perusing her social media, I saw her post about that photo, and I'm like, that's the album art. That's the name of the album. It completely encapsulated everything I was going for, which is really cool.
Before I even heard any note off of the album, and I saw the title, and I thought from that perspective it was a so apt title, knowing that I wasn't sure if it was Memory Unfixed, meaning you can't fix it, like it is what it is, you just have to work with it, or was it Memory Unfixed as in it's not a fixed, like as in like if you were to put something permanently down, that it's unfixed, that it's like it can be moved around or whatever. So I wasn't sure if it was either, neither, or both.
I think it's either. It feels more like it's malleable and movable today. Recovery has shown me that. When I first really jumped at the title, it was more Memory Unfixed, like here's a collection of songs that I feel like are these little snapshots or vignettes about different themes or interactions that have inspired me, and they all feel related to that idea of unfixed memories and some beautiful memories. Always My Forever is...
I'll carve your name into the sun, love you till my days are done. I'll never let you go. You're the fire inside my blood, burn the bad and leave the good, my angel. I'll get close, I'll never let you go. Anywhere you go, no matter what you do, you're always my forever, always my forever.
A guy with a lot of unfixed memories singing to a person who has loved him in spite of those unfixed memories. And so on Memory Unfixed to me is a kind of a metaphor for all the pile of things that have happened to us, both good and bad, the meaning that we assign to it, and the impact that it has on us and the way that we view the world. And now I think you articulated it really well. Is it malleable? I'm beginning to believe that we can't change what has happened to us, right? I can't change what has happened to me. I can reassign meaning to it.
Sure.
And in that way, the memories are unfixed and in a more malleable way.
Yeah.
You know, I can't relive the events. I can rip them up.
Sure.
And duct tape them back together and kind of rearrange them and cobble this pain and joy and beauty into this lovely little mosaic.
Sure. And I think too, like fixed comes with that sense of it's broken, and if you accept that it's not broken, it's more just it's where you were in that time frame, and you can forgive yourself. Then no longer does it need to be fixed.
Yeah.
Then it can be unfixed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So then love the music, like especially so. Lost Boys is the opening track. And I love that song. I think that's great. Yeah, the whole thing, obviously, but that one always kind of jumps out. I find myself singing that one as I walk around. There's something about, particularly the chorus, that's just it's an earworm. But I mean, like anything in particular you would want to share about how it all came together, or any particular song about it?
Always My Forever, and this was an intentional. It's interesting that Lost Boys and Always My Forever kind of bookend the album.
Sure.
Always My Forever is the first song I wrote. I wrote that right before we were getting ready to go on tour to promote When We Were in Love. And Lost Boys is the first song I wrote the day we moved into our house in Nashville.
Oh, cool.
And so I love that they are kind of the frame around the album. Because one, the album begins in this interior reality that I experience on a daily basis of I feel like a very large gap between the person I am and the person I would like to be. Whereas the album closes, it's saying, I'm gonna love you no matter what. Because you've loved me in spite of everything, and that feels again some of the dots that I connect are always in retrospect.
Sure.
And I'm like, I'm glad that my subconscious knew what it was doing. I had no idea.
Yeah, no, again, that is very cool when the universe does that stuff.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, I mean, people should check out the new album and the prior ones. The Mike Maines catalog is like just loaded with great music, so
yeah, you can check us out at MikeMainesMusic.com, and we definitely will be heading out on tour this spring, and that'll be a full US tour, and that will be a headlining tour, so we'll be playing for a lot longer, and we'll be playing a bunch of new and old music and everything in between.
Cool. And is anything in Pennsylvania going to be part of that tour?
Oh, yeah.
Bethlehem, hope I'll keep my fingers crossed. And I hope you come back to Music Fest. You're always such a great stage for Music Fest.
I do too.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed playing Music Fest. It's awesome.
But Mike, thanks so much for spending some time on a tour. I know that's not easy to do, and also thank you for sharing all those incredibly important stories for, on tough topics. I really appreciate you taking the time to share.
It's an honor.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Phil. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you. David.
Phillip.
So I was just, amazed by how comfortable he was in sharing just all of those different experiences that he had and the comfort level he had, and pretty amazing stuff.
Yeah, he talks about it there's a relative sense of calm when he talks about it, in a way that it's something that he obviously wants to be transparent about. And that's a good thing. I think sort of, as I think you said, the phrase that you used is normalizing some of those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think he's clearly a steward and a champion for that. It's somewhat inspired us. It's a little bit of so we shared at the top of the show, save the date for the Winter Wonder Jam, which is December 10th. A little sneak peek into 2024. On February 4th, we're going to do an entire episode similarly with a combination of a live in-person audience and, the live stream, dedicated to mental health, and somewhat around this hope of normalizing the conversations. And so we're going to be sharing some prior interviews. We're going to be sharing some, in-person interviews, in-person music. So hopefully we pull together a day that is, a special experience. Again, with the effort to hopefully just simply get these words, these phrases, these diagnoses not filled with shame or some sort of stigma, and just do a little bit of chipping away at that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the conversations around it, the more conversations that are had that are seen as familiar, that are seen as comfortableness around it, can help anybody with either talking about themselves, talking about other people, figuring out what it is that will make them find their place in the world.
Yeah. And I think the other portion of the interview that we hope came across was just how great his music is.
Yeah, well, then there's the other side. Let's talk about the fact that he's also, his music is great. It's you use the phrase during the interview of earwormy. There are times when he definitely has big sort of almost the pop sensibility, especially when it comes to his choruses.
Yes.
That are absolutely fantastic. And I think I might have even said this during the first time we spoke with him. He does the juxtaposition of, and you mentioned this during the interview, the lighter music or happier music or upbeat music with a downtrodden lyric, which is very a John Lennon trick.
Sure.
Right, that is so not a bad person to get compared to.
Not at all. And again, like there's these also balances between, like, you could see that music being somewhat like 80s stadium rock without sounding like 80s music. Like, I don't know. I find his music to be, addictive. Like it's the kind of thing where I just always find myself singing it and wanting to go back to it, and then watching him perform again. Like we often say, the live performance is so much more of the experience on top of the recording.
Yeah, well, I mean, and the stuff translates, and it's the passion comes through, especially with a lot of the emotional stuff that he's delivering on.
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody picked it up, but anytime either he or I started to talk about a track, we edited in a quick sample of that song to give people a little bit of a flavor of the catalog. We talked about Lost Boys and deliberately didn't bring that song in because I do have a recording of that from that night as well. And again, I wanted people to experience the full track. So like we often do, post-credits is going to be the Lost Boys, which is the first song, as you heard him kind of explain there, off of this latest release of Memory Unfixed. So people can stick around for that. But other than that, David, thank you so much for going along the journey on this one. I thought it was such the highs and lows talking to Mike Mains, and it was such appreciation and gratitude for him spending that time with us, because it was obviously not easy because he's on tour, but then also not easy because of the content.
Well, I'm glad that you were able to set up the time to do that. It was done in a great space, and I'm glad he made the time. That was really generous on his part. So, good conversation.
All right, Phil, let's say goodbye to everybody.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Your Next Favorite Band. We'd like to sincerely thank Mike Mains for, again, like we just said, taking the time during the tour to sit with us. He could have been resting that day, but he spent that time with us and not only shared some great stories about his music catalog and the more recent release of Memory Unfixed, but also this very deep and important time that he had focusing on his mental health and working through addiction and suicide attempt. And the reason why we shared a lot of that too was he shares that in between songs. So there's an element to that he definitely wants those parts of his story out there. So if you go see a show, you'll hear that as well. And then, like we said, you'll certainly enjoy his amazing live performances that are electric and cinematic. We'll be sharing links in the show notes to the website, Spotify, YouTube channels, and anything else that we can to kind of continue the journey of his music and his story. Please check all of those out. And as always, our hope here is to bring you your next favorite band. If you tuned in tonight because you already knew Mike Mains, thank you so much for tuning in. We hope that maybe you liked what you heard and saw, and you would like and subscribe and follow us so that we might bring you your next favorite band. The YouTube channel and the podcast has all of our historical information out there. The website does as well. So you might already have your next favorite band out there and you just got to find it. So hope to see you at a live show soon. And now, here is Lost Boys off of Memory Unfixed, front live, recorded at Ardmore Music Hall.
All of the lost boys are chasing Peter Pan, trying to get back to Neverland. And all of the good girls are at home crying in their beds, 'cause nobody came to rescue them. When will we wake up from this dream? Oh Mary, when will we wake up from this dream? I'm alone.